Today I'm going to teach you how to make 4 different chocolate chip cookies. They're actually very similar, and yet minor differences make a huge difference. The classic tollhouse, nice and golden, thin and crunchy. Here's a classic chocolate chip cookie that's a little bit thicker and a little bit fatter, but still has a nice softness. My family recipe, the oatmeal chocolate chip macadamia nut cookie, and the big fat crunchy on the outside, soft on the inside, the Levain bakery copycat recipe. If you love from scratch, homemade, decadent, delicious recipes, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Let's make some awesome. Now, each of these 4 recipes is actually crazy similar when it comes to the ingredients and almost identical when it comes to the methodology, and yet they have such distinct differences in the final product. It's amazing how tweaking just a couple little things can completely change these cookies. So we're gonna start with a classic Toll House wide flat chocolate chip cookie. Start with the butter, the brown sugar, and the white sugar, and cream together. Next up, eggs and vanilla. So flour, baking soda, and salt. Now it's time to add the chocolate chips. When I'm making this cookie dough for my cookie dough ice cream, or for deep fried cookie dough, or when I'm making my chocolate chip cookie ice cream cones, I use the mini chocolate chips because that way you're just getting little bursts of chocolate in these little chunks, or the nice flat cookies, and I'm not getting major chunks of chocolate. That would be difficult to navigate in all 3 of those cases. But because we're making classic chocolate chip cookies today, I'm using traditional semi-sweet chocolate chips. Now you can use milk chocolate, dark chocolate, whatever you prefer. As for brands, it kind of varies. My mom is a milk chocolate Ghirardelli's girls. I'm a Trader Joe's semi-sweet girl. It just depends on what you love. Now I like to use a cookie scoop. It makes it really easy to get the cookies on the trays and keep everything really uniform in size. But when you do it that way, you tend to have a lot of dough on the top of the dome. So I always take a couple of extra chocolate chips and add them to the top of the cookies so that you'll have some chocolate chips directly on top. Now you're gonna bake those at 350 degrees for 8 to 9 minutes. Now if you look at them around the 8-minute mark, they will be poofy and soft and smooth with a little bit of golden, just barely starting at the bottom. If you wait 1 more minute to that 9-minute mark, for me at least, there starts to be a little imperfection in the tops. I hate to use the word cracking, but you'll kind of notice like a ring within the ring of the cookie. It'll be a little bit more golden on the outside, and that's when I like to pull them out. You can of course cook them just a little bit longer. They'll get a little bit more brown and even harder. I like them to be just have a little bit of crunch but still be a soft cookie, so that's why I like to pull them out around the 9-minute mark. Now the second chocolate chip cookie recipe that we're making is also a classic chocolate chip cookie. It's just a little bit fatter and a little bit softer. This happens by adding a little bit more flour and an extra leavening ingredient. It has baking powder as well as the baking soda. Also, it has just a little bit less sugar. We start by adding the butter, the sugar, the brown sugar, and creaming. Add the eggs, the vanilla, add flour, the baking soda, the salt, and a little bit of baking powder. You can see that this dough is a lot thicker than that last dough was. Add the chocolate chip. And just like before, I like to add extra chocolate chips to the top. It just makes the final cookies look a little better. It doesn't affect the taste at all. I just leave out some of the chocolate chips when I'm mixing the batter so that I have extra to add. Now these cookies cook slightly hotter at 375 for 8 to 9 minutes. You can see that even though the cookies are smaller, they're also fatter. And while they're golden around the outside, they're also golden at the top. That's because of the higher heat that they bake at. Quick tip is as you take off cookies and put new dough balls on, if you're putting dough balls on a hot pan, I always take 1 minute off the cooking time for all pans after the first one. Now remember, it totally depends on your oven, so make sure the first batch that you just watch them a little bit. In my opinion, better to be a little undercooked than a little overcooked, but whatever your preference is. Now this third batch of cookies is actually my favorite because this is the cookie recipe that I grew up with. It's the one that my dad made us my whole life and that we still have him make us every time we go to visit. It's my mom's #1 requested dessert. So how it differentiates from the other recipes is that instead of the dry ingredients being all flour, it actually uses half ground oats and half flour. Now it has the same butter and sugar content as the first recipe, but it has more dry ingredients and more leavening like the second recipe. So it's a little bit thicker and fatter cookie, but it's still nice and sweet. Now it also has a little bit more vanilla, and so it just changes the flavor a little bit. First thing that we're gonna do is grind the oatmeal. Now you can use a blender or a food processor for this. 2 notes on this. If you're going to use a blender, do it in small batches. If you put the whole amount in the blender, it tends to start to get stuck, and then the heat of the blender moving super fast tends to cook the oats, which is not an appealing flavor. Also make sure that you're using normal oats and not quick oats. Quick oats totally changes the texture and flavor as well, and it's not as appealing in my opinion. Now, like all the other recipes, you can just take all of these ingredients and add them right into the bowl after creaming the butter and sugar. But I like to just take all the dry ingredients, as long as we already have a container dirty, and mix them all in the food processor. Baking soda, baking powder, and salt. So add the butter, the brown sugar, and the white sugar. Add the eggs and the vanilla. Now add all the dry ingredients. If it's too wet, add a little bit more flour. Add the chocolate chips and the macadamia nuts. Now you can see all that thick oatmeal in there. Now the finer you grind it, the more smooth your batter will be. Now I cooked these cookies at 360 for 9 minutes. Now these first 3 cookies, you can cook all of them at 350 for 9 minutes and they'll cook just fine. By cooking them at the 375 or the 360, you're just giving a little bit more golden color around the outside of the cookie. So it's just a personal preference. Now these will have an even rougher texture because of the oatmeal. There should be just a little bit of goldening on top and slight goldening on the bottom. Now my mom likes to take the cookies, put it in the oven for like 2 minutes and pull them out, and she calls those cooked. She thinks 9 minutes is burnt. So pull the cookies out at whenever they're at the stage that you like your cookies at. Now it's time for our final cookie. Now this one is a Levain Bakery copycat recipe. Now their cookies are like 6 ounces. They're huge cookies. I only do 3 ounces. They're still bigger than the traditional cookie, but they're not quite that huge. Anyway, how this recipe differentiates from the others, it has similar butter content. It has less sugar though, and then instead of being all-purpose flour, half of it is cake flour, and then again, there's more flour that helps this be a bigger, fatter cookie. There's also pecans as well as the chocolate chips in here, and again, those add-ins help make the cookies even fatter as well, and it also cooks at a higher temperature. By cooking it at a higher temperature, it helps the outside get crispy and brown. This is going to be a lot darker than the other cookies, but the inside is going to be still slightly undercooked and gooey just because of their size and how big they are. Now if you serve them right away, you're going to get a gooey inside. If you wait until they've sat for about an hour, then they tend to set completely and it won't be gooey on the inside. It'll just be a soft, delicious cookie. Start with the butter. Now you'll notice this is going to be a much bigger batch than the others. This is about double the size of the other cookies. The reason for that is the normal sized batch is only going to make about 15 of these super large cookies, while doubling it and making this larger batch is still going to give us around 30 to 33 cookies. The brown sugar, the normal sugar, and cream. Now add the eggs and vanilla. Now we're going to add the cake flour. Now the all-purpose flour, baking powder, baking soda, and salt. Now this is a big, thick batter, but it's a wetter batter still. We're going to add our chocolate chips and our chopped pecans. Now we're going to weigh out the dough. I find that using the big cookie scoop gets really close. You just don't want to scrape it off. You want to keep it overflowing, and that's about right. We want between 3 to 3.5 ounces. My sweet spot's like 3.1 ounces. One other note, when you use the scoop, you tend to get a smooth side, and you're not gonna bake these cookies with as many ridges if you do that. So I take the ball and I break it and I put it together in a more rough shape if you want yours to have more of those crevices in your final cookie. Now we're gonna bake these at 400 degrees for 9 to 10 minutes. Now 9 minutes is gonna leave you a much more gooey center, where more like 10 or 11 minutes is gonna get your cookie cooked through, but a much browner, crunchier outside. I have over 200 cookies in my kitchen, and now it's time to give them a try and see what we think. First up, the classic crunchy thin tollhouse cookie. It has a great crunch. There's a reason this cookie is a classic. It's delicious. Now for our second cookie that ends up being just a little bit fatter than our first cookie, but other than that, a very similar cookie. It still has a great crunch. It's just a little fluffier and slightly softer. And of course, my family favorite, the oatmeal macadamia nut chocolate chip. This is a much softer cookie, but it still has that great crunch on the bottom and from the macadamia nuts. This is my childhood. It doesn't get much better than this. And now our big fat chocolate pecan. Has a great crunch on the outside, but then it's almost underdone. It is a little underdone in the best possible way on the inside. It's just this soft, just perfection. And the best part about cookies being slightly underdone like this is they last longer too, so these will still be good tomorrow and the day after and the day after, as if they're gonna last that long. And that's all for cookies. I want to say that my favorite is the oatmeal chocolate chip, since that's the one I grew up with, but I have to say the Levain copycat recipe has just stolen my heart with that great crunch on the outside and that perfect, slightly underdone center. So if I could only make one for the rest of my life, it would probably be that one. But I'd love to hear in the comment box what your cookie would be if you could only make one for the rest of your life. Now let's check out the next video.